Thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. Temperatures drop and migrants are left out in the cold as Chicago struggles with what to do.
From day one, I've said that the federal government has to do more.
Mayor Johnson visits with White House officials and asks for more federal money to assist Chicago's migrant crisis.
I cannot change my pledge to my community, who have I promised that we will make these decisions together. And it's for that reason, Mr. President, that I asked to be recorded as a no.
Meanwhile, new plans for migrant shelters and an abandoned Kmart and Jewel receive aldermanic pushback. City ordinances to require paid leave for all workers and to institute a graduated real estate sales tax to fund programs for the homeless on track for approval. State lawmakers propose new districts for Chicago's coming elected school board.
Read your bill. If you read your bill, you'll find out where your money's going to.
Sticker shock in the north suburbs as property taxes go up by the largest amount in 30 years. And a little Halloween fun among friends during a contentious city council debate. Hope you all had a happy Halloween, and you all here. Welcome to our panel. Joining us are Laura Rodríguez Presa with the Chicago Tribune, our very own Heather Cherone, Becky with Chalkbeat Chicago, and Jacoby Cochran with CityCast Chicago. Let's get right into it. Heather Cherone, Mayor Johnson wants $5 billion from Washington, as do other mayors of cities in similar positions. How likely is he going to get anything, if that?
Well, it is a big question because, of course, we all know that Congress is gridlocked. They can't even agree on a package to help Israel defend itself against Hamas. The chances of more money making it through the Congress, I think, perhaps are slim to none. And that is why we have seen this week a ramping up of the sort of city council debate over how to care for and shelter these migrants as winter is barreling down on us.
And I made this point on WBEZ this afternoon. It almost seems like it has to be some kind of executive action from the president if any money is going to come, like FEMA or something like that. Are there any funds to be unlocked from the executive branch?
In 2022, the city got some money from FEMA. However, you have to declare disasters. You have to meet all sorts of different sort of levels to sort of unlock that things. And whether or not that's sort of a break glass in case of emergency option, it's unclear at this point. But the fact of the matter is that the city council is only set to appropriate $150 million to care for migrants in 2024. It is clear that the cost of that will be at least double that, if not more. And there's no real plan B with a lot of hard choices ahead.
I was going to say, the city's going to run through that money in a matter of months. Laura Rodríguez Presa, it's cold out there. It was cold this week. It snowed.
This week.
How did the migrants handle that? You went out and talked to a bunch of them.
Yeah, not well. A lot of them come from tropical places with very, warm weather. So they have heard that Chicago was cold. A lot of them tell me, but not that cold. They said,
and
right?
This is just the beginning. Here.
Right, and it was interesting talking to them because they were like, "Yeah, the cold's coming. We're excited to see the snow." But when they started feeling the wind and they realized we have to live outside and the wind is going to hit, it's not the same as, being inside and seeing the snow come down. So a lot of them are choosing or thinking about maybe leaving. That's something very interesting that is happening. I think that some of them are just understanding now that it's not like what the first migrants got initially, which was a hotel and some food and then eventually settling down. There's people that are realizing that even in shelters, they're just not going to be able to survive.
It's obviously not going to be ideal. There's no heat out there for them. There's no space heaters. There's no electrical hookup. Jacoby Cochran, aldermen like Ronnie Mosley are pushing back against a site in his ward by an abandoned Jewel. Alderman Tabarez is pushing back against this abandoned Kmart. What's wrong with these sites? I mean, these are giant warehouses. It seems like they would be ideal for the time being to house migrants.
I think it's that last point, between the time being and the ideal site. They're ideal sites because they can hold large amounts of people at one point. But then the question becomes, well, why are these sites even here? Why do we have an abundance of abandoned Kmarts, abandoned Save-A-Lots, abandoned now a Walgreens across the street from the old Jules parking lot in Ronnie Mosley's ward? And communities ask, well, what does this say about our community and about what's being invested here? They want to turn that Jewel on 115th into mixed residential units, turn it into retail to try and re-spark investment in the community. But every time they look up, they're losing something. They're losing a Walmart, they're losing a Jewel, they're losing a grocery store. And now they feel like they're not even being communicated about what is being brought to their community, which are these potential winterized tent camps that have no sort of end in sight. The UN said this week, you might start a space as a temporary shelter, but there's no way to guarantee how long it'll remain.
And understood that there are a lot of residents that feel like, where are the resources for our communities that have been here? But at the same time, Becky, Vivi, migrants are here. It's getting cold. They need to stay somewhere.
Right, and then we've run out of shelter space in the existing shelter system, and so the city needs to come up with something. These temporary tents are a quick solution. Rehabbing even an old Kmart is going to take a little bit of time. City property is going to take time to fix up. So the city is going to really have to figure out, how can we take care of the immediate problem and then also solve the solution that's going to be long-term, creating additional housing where people can eventually live long-term permanently. And I think the fight you're hearing in city council, that, you know, Heather was front lines this week of just this disagreement among, and that really the politics among that council of, you know, sort of not in my ward, not in my backyard.
That's a really interesting point, Heather Cherone, because there's some interesting political alliances and sort of enemies being formed here.
Right. So, I mean, we have talked a lot, Paris, about the decades-old tradition of Aldermanic Prerogative, whereas if you are an alderperson, you get the final say over what goes in your ward and what doesn't go in your ward. And Brandon Johnson has said clearly, look, this is a humanitarian crisis. We do not have the luxury of letting each individual alderperson make these decisions. The problem is then that leaves the mayor at odds with not only members of the community who are vehemently angry, but also the local alderperson. And it has alienated Julia Ramirez, who campaigned for Brandon Johnson, who supports Brandon Johnson.
She's the 12th ward alderperson.
In the 12th ward.
The tent city would go in her ward, Brighton Park.
Yeah, and Ronnie Mosley also supported Brandon Johnson, so he is losing allies on the city council, which is why you saw his allies step in to prevent a vote on the tent camp at 115th and Halsted. But it is scheduled to come back for another vote on Tuesday, so it's very possible that we will do this whole debate over again, in addition to a final vote on the proposal known as Bring Chicago Home, which is sort of designed to address those long-term issues about housing in Chicago.
And we'll get to that in a second, but Laura Rodríguez, Presa, these projects can still go forward even despite the local aldermanic opposition, no?
Well, it seems like they can, right? I think that's what's happening right now, and that's why there's so much anger. I think that Brandon Johnson is feeling the pressure of seeing these people out there, right? Part of the reporting that I do is pretty much showing how inhumane it is to have those children out there. But then there's also that, you know, the fair concerns from the community members about what's coming to their neighborhoods. The anatomy of the tent cities is pretty interesting as it is, right? These people don't understand how things work in the United States, in this country, and it's a very different culture. So the dynamic of it is all very interesting. I don't even know that if they were to build this tent, how good it will do for them to be in there.
When you talk about tent cities, though, you drive by any police station right now, like right over here, Leland and Pulaski, there are tent cities. It's camper tents that are just all around the
and I was
block.
just telling you the how they've created almost like small homes there, right? Some of them have grills outside. That is where they make their food. I passed by the 12th district, and they have chairs, they have tables, they have even, I think there was like a dresser there, and they actually had, very interesting, a sign that said home sweet home. So it's for them, I feel like for a lot of them, it was kind of like, well, if this is going to be and the weather's like, you know, it's going to be nice, then we can just stay here and live here. It's not very different from what they do in their home country. But the cold now, it's making them realize that it's probably not something that they can do here.
Jacoby Cochran, do you wonder why it seems like this is inordinately falling on the city of Chicago? Now, we've heard some suburbs like Oak Park now starting to step up. Joliet turned down money. Where's the help from other communities?
I mean, Chicago is the third largest city in America, right? We have the arrogance that we have as Chicagoans that we can solve any problem, that we are up to any challenge. And we've been a sanctuary city for over 40 years or up to 40 years. And But you have to stand on that business. You can't just proclaim we're a place where people can come if they're seeking asylum, where people can come for a better and brighter life. You have to build those systems. And now that we're being asked to sort of put that rubber to the road, it's clear, well, we haven't invested in those decades.
And there was a Chicago Tribune editorial kind of calling on Chicagoans to look in the mirror a little bit. You've talked about these high-minded ideals, but when, as you said, the rubber meets the road, you see nothing but this opposition. Speaking of the sanctuary city part of this, Heather, why is that getting so much controversy right now? We have to remind viewers, sanctuary city has nothing to do with migrants and asylum seekers. That has to do with undocumented immigrants. But some aldermen want to make this a big debate right now.
Well, the fact of the matter is that Republican politicians going back to President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s have targeted Democratic cities for proclaiming to be welcoming to undocumented immigrants or all immigrants. And this is nothing different. The only issue is that now Texas Governor Greg Abbott has figured out how to use these people seeking a better life, seeking a piece of the American dream, as essentially to sort of force Chicago to confront whether it is actually welcoming to immigrants or whether we are, as a city, hypocrites, as Texas Governor Greg Abbott thinks we are. And the question is, can Chicago live up to those commitments that you were just talking about? Or is Chicago going to say, no, we don't want to be a sanctuary city anymore? And that's what we've heard from Alderman Ray Lopez and Alderman Anthony Beale and Alderman Brendan Riley, who said that no longer Chicago sort of embraces those ideals. And I think that Chicago has yet to sort of grapple with the fact that sort of who we are as a city has always relied on welcoming immigrants. And in fact, we've welcomed as a city just as many Ukrainian immigrants as we have welcomed Venezuelan immigrants and from South and Central America. The circumstances are just very different. So while the sanctuary city ordinance has nothing to do with this debate, Republican politicians for decades have used it as a wedge, and they have found significant sort of space to divide Chicago, and there are members of the city council, for political reasons, have leaned into that.
But clearly cities like Chicago were not ready for this. I mean, given what Governor Abbott did, Becky, Vevea, got to move on to some other city council business. The vote to institute a graduated real estate sales tax to fund homeless programs. It's stalled for now, but it's pretty much gonna go.
This was something that, has been alive since Mayor Lightfoot was elected. This was something that advocates were pushing back in 2019, 2018 even. Yes. And so it's been stuck in this rules committee position, sort of in limbo. It has finally been taken out of committee, and it is stalled currently, but it has the support of the mayor, it has the support of a significant contingent of city council, and it will likely be on voters' ballots next year.
Jacoby, Cochran, do you buy some of the concerns from the real estate industry that this is just going to depress the market even more if they institute this additional tax on sales for that increment over $1 million and then another one increment over $1.5 million?
No, I almost always don't buy when the business community, the real estate community says that any ordinance that looks to raise revenues, whether it's about the real estate transfer tax or it's about offering 10 days of paid leave to your workers, that this somehow is going to take the bottom out of our real estate or our business community. So I always sort of signal that as fear-mongering, but I do understand people's concerns. Is that us at this table, we're going to be making $1.2, $1.5 million real estate deals? No. So a lot of people in my circle aren't concerned with it. So I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but more times than not, I feel like it is, sort of put out there to scare the rest of us out of having a conversation.
It's currently a tax that exists as a flat tax. Exactly. When you purchase real estate, there's already that tax on there. So this graduates it. So if you're in that upper $1 million level, you pay a slightly higher.
Which is a small percentage of the sales. Yes. And by the way, to make this more palatable, they lowered slightly the rate on properties under $1 million. Heather Cherone, what about the business community's concerns about the vote to institute mandatory paid leave for workers in Chicago? They say, well, businesses will just fold up and go to the suburbs.
Well, that's the argument. That was also their argument back in 2016 when Chicago was one of the first cities to require businesses to offer their employees sick leave. I'm pretty sure that the city's economy withstood that frontal attack, and Mayor Brandon Johnson and his allies have said the city will benefit from this because it will mean that Chicagoans will live better lives, they will be more productive, and that their families will be more stable because they'll be able to take a day off to take their kid to the doctor. The issue is that Brandon Brandon Johnson has sort of said he's a collaborator, that he wants to reach compromise. He tried really hard to reach compromise with the business coalition led by the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, could not get there. The original proposal was for 15 days of paid leave for whatever reason, sick or you just aren't feeling it. The current proposal set for a vote on Tuesday would be 5 sick days and 5 paid time off days, which would be more than any other big city, including New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco.
And this proposal flew through committee. Safe to say it's got the votes to pass full city council.
So I would imagine that we're going to see some more parliamentary shenanigans on Tuesday, and they will block a vote on Tuesday to sort of give more time for opposition to sort of marshal against it. So we were probably not going to see a final vote on that until November 15th, but perhaps they'll surprise me and everybody will get on the same page and sing Kumbaya.
That would be a surprise in this day and age. So speaking of parliamentary shenanigans, let's show that picture of the Halloween costumes worn by some of our aldermanic friends there. First of all, so that's Ray Lopez.
It is.
On the left, what villain is he there?
He is dressed as Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat.
Oh,
Now,
Mortal Kombat, okay.
I had to stop him and say, "Good sir, explain yourself. I am an old white lady and I do not understand what is
Mortal
happening
Kombat's
there."
been around for a
No,
long time.
it's
right
not
here
my
in
deal.
Chicago.
Right?
Yeah.
Is
so,
it Midway Games?
Right.
Okay, all right.
So Alderman Vasquez, who you see right there, is dressed as a little free library, and this was a relatively lighthearted moment because Alderman Lopez, or AKA Sub-Zero, wants the city to put new restrictions on the libraries to prevent people from sort of putting them up in the public way without a permit. Alderman Vasquez says that is a ridiculous proposal. It is a solution in search of a problem, and that's why he came to City Council dressed as a little free library on Halloween. That was the high point of City Council relations this week.
I don't think that Mortal Kombat's going to add Little Free Library as its new character to its future video games. Becky Vevea, we have to talk about education for a bit. Springfield lawmakers are now proposing 20 elected school board districts. As we have to remind everybody, per city law, we're going to have an elected school board pretty soon here. There's going to be 20 districts. Eventually, they will all be elected, but it's going to be hybrid for a while. So without confusing the heck out of everybody, what do we need to know about this proposal about what these districts are going to look like?
Well, we have a map on our website. We actually have all 3 versions on our website, chalkbeat.org. So you can look and toggle through to see what neighborhood, what district your neighborhood would fall into. But essentially dividing up the city into 20 districts, trying to comply with the Voting Rights Act, compact contiguous districts that also keep like-minded voters together, or interest group, certain populations together. So this map, this third draft, has 7 majority black districts, 6 majority Latino districts, 5 majority white, and 2 that are no majority but lean white. So they're white plurality, if you will.
The issue here, some groups are saying, though, that the majority of students in CPS are
Correct.
Latino.
Which is sort of a difficult task, given that our school district is 10% white and our 46% Latino and about 38% black. You would be very hard-pressed to be able to draw a map that matches the student population. So they have to draw the map based on the entire population. But some of the critics early in the spring, when they punted the deadline for drawing these maps, was that you need to at least try to get additional representation toward Black and Latino, because that is who the public school system primarily serves. So this third draft is, everyone I talked to said it's getting closer, it's getting better. It could pass in the veto session, but we'll see where things shake out.
Lori, you want to jump in?
Yeah,
here?
I was just going to say, and this is something that I'm not an expert on, but so the new arrivals, is this a result of the amount of children that are enrolling, or is this?
Well, so our enrollment has flatlined this year, in part because of the new arrivals and the migrant students that have enrolled in public schools. They are maybe living in tents on the streets, but they're in our public school system. And, schools are feeling the crunch because they have to, be able to serve these students, many of whom do not speak English yet. They're enrolled in English learner programs. The district is trying to staff up for that. And I would say that, the school system, what's interesting about this elected school board map is that even before the migrants and the new arrivals, there was a big question about undocumented parents. Many students in the school system have parents who are not documented and therefore cannot vote. And so how do you ensure that they have, is it some kind of committee or task force where they are able to have a voice to say to the school board, these are things that we care about in our schools. We would like you to make sure you're paying attention to our voice, even if we can't, have a seat on this board.
This is really confusing because it's going to be a hybrid school board first.
Yes.
So only half of the amount of folks will get to vote. Half the districts will get to vote the first time.
There's a proposal that was literally just dropped before this show began that will have to be debated next week or in Springfield in the spring. But essentially, they're proposing that, yes, 10 of the districts would vote would be elected in 2024 and 10 would be elected in 2026. And then going forward, you'd have staggered elections. So every 2 years, there would be half the board would turn over. The school board president will eventually be elected at large by everyone in the city, but they'll be appointed. The mayor will get to appoint the president and the 10 who don't get to vote in 2024.
We
Will they leave it as 20?
Chalkbeat.org has it all laid out for you.
We need a whiteboard here to sort of like
And
draw
I
all
will
the
say
lines.
everything I'm saying might be different next Friday because the veto session, lawmakers will debate and decide and ultimately decide whether or not to affirm this up. They have until April 1st. But if you want to run for school board, you can start collecting petitions on March 26th of 2024.
A lot more democracy to come here.
You'll have to figure out which district you're in if you want to run.
Most folks don't even know what ward they're in, so to know what school district, it's going to be difficult here.
They're going to have a civics lesson.
They're going to have a civics. Okay, Jacoby, speaking of a civics lesson, the Ed Burke trial is starting on Monday. That's going to be a civics lesson into the old Chicago way of doing business. What are you looking forward to learning once this trial gets underway?
Well, I learned everything I needed to know about the Ed Burke trial sitting down with WTTW's own Heather Cherone, who's going to be on CityCast breaking down the trial on Monday. And I'm interested to see how much of Chicago's political way is on trial, as much as Ed Burke is. So much of his defense is, well, this is how politics are done. I've done nothing wrong. This is the Chicago way. And others are arguing, well, that way has been wrong, that way has been illegal, that these allegations, don't just come up since, they got thousands of hours of wiretaps. The people have had these questions for decades and decades. And so I'm interested to see how fast the trial goes, how many charges will the jury vote guilty or not guilty on, and then ultimately, how does the city council move forward? Ed Burke is no longer an alderman, but his shadow still looms large over City Hall.
And Heather Cherone, are we going to see Danny Solis, who is the alderman who got in a lot of trouble of his own, turned government mole, who the FBI basically put a wire on and said, okay, now go pretend you're getting Ed Burke to do this. Now go pretend you're trying to do this. Is he going to take the stand?
Well, Ed Burke's lawyers say they will call Danny Solis to the stand, but that will not happen until after prosecutors make their case, and prosecutors have said they will not call Danny Solis. So I think it's very much an open question at this point. I think all Chicago reporters want to hear Danny Solis talk about what he did as a government informant, and to hear him talk about serving as the most impactful government informant in political corruption cases in Chicago's history, which is no small feat. The larger question, I think, is what is Ed Burke's defense going to be? Is it going to be that's just how the sausage is made, or is it going to be similar to what Alderman Patrick Daley Thompson argued in his corruption trial? Well, I wasn't paying very close attention. I didn't mean to do it. His lawyers have sort of put out both defenses in pretrial hearings. It will be interesting to see sort of how that all shakes out. But I think it's worth taking a moment to just say that this is a stunning moment in Chicago political history. Ed Burke was the most powerful politician who ruled City Hall with just an iron fist for decades. He thwarted Mayor Harold Washington. He created sort of council wars, and then he went on to sort of serve as this sort of, senatorial sort of Chicago historian, waxing nostalgic about the city's history. Yes, yeah. And, I think I am just fascinated that he is about to turn 80. He will turn 80 just before New Year's, and he now faces the possibility of spending his retirement years in prison, because if he is convicted, he faces a significant sentence.
We know that he would much rather be spending that time in Powers Lake,
yes.
where he has a home. Okay, we are out of time for now, so our thanks to Laura Rodríguez, Presa, Heather Cherone, Becky Vevea, and Jacoby Cochran, and we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And a program note, you won't want to miss the story of fiery, openly gay Chicago AIDS activist Danny Sotomayor, who used civil disobedience to wage war on city officials who ignored the AIDS crisis. Join us at 8 p.m. for Chicago Stories, The Outrage of Danny Sotomayor. And you can watch new episodes of Chicago Stories Friday nights at 8 on WTTW and streaming on the PBS app, and explore the website now at WTTW.com/Chicago Stories. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful weekend. So Jacoby, let's talk some sports here. The Bears, they're not in contention. Yes, snooze, wake me up when it matters. They get this pass rusher, Montez Sweat, for a second-round pick. Why are they acting like they're a team that's like just on the cusp of playoff contention?
I don't know. They're trying to pretend they're the Raptors getting Kawhi Leonard. And they're like, if he doesn't sign with us, we can get a championship out of it. That's not going to happen.
They're 2-6.
No. So we're losing draft picks. We're losing some type of plan to move forward. Our quarterback is still hurt. Yeah, this early in the season already looks like it's time to wrap things up.
And then,
but he's got a really cool name.
Montez
Sweat.
It's
like a great name for a football player. Montez Sweat.
Great name for headline writers.
Yeah.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.